Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first give you an overview of the coming week. The week is framed really by the attendance of the Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters and myself at the Pacific Island Forum in Nauru. Mr. Peters, along with officials, Pacific leaders and the New Zealand media contingent, arrived today after heading off this morning. I'll be attending for one full day on Wednesday for the Leaders' Retreat and making a series of announcements. As I've said previously, I will be raising issues to do with the detention of asylum seekers and refugees on Nauru during the forum, and have made it clear that I still hope to meet people living on the island while I am there. Mr. Peters and officials arrived today and will be looking at what is feasible in this regard. In terms of my movements to Nauru, as many of you will already know, I will be heading over at 2 a.m. on Wednesday morning, returning at 11:30 p.m. Wednesday evening, which allows me to participate in the Leaders' Retreat. I spent quite a bit of time deliberating over whether or not I would attend the Pacific Island Forum in Nauru. I analysed all of my options. I'm not in a position at the stage of Neve being just 11 weeks old to have travelled with her because she would not have all of the immunisations required to travel with me. The other option was for me to not attend at all, but given the importance that we place on our relationships with the Pacific Islands in the reset, that equally didn't feel like an option. When weighing up therefore the logistics around travel, I asked officials to check what extra costs I would be imposing on the Crown if I were travelling separately. They assured me that because of the 757 not being able to remain on Nauru anyway, but having to leave the island so other planes could come in and depart, and also the fact that if it wasn't flying there, it would be taking up hours somewhere else anyway, that on balance, I decided it was worth me travelling for the full day on the Wednesday in order to fulfil my obligations as Prime Minister, both here but also in representing New Zealand at the Pacific Island Forum. I wanted to share that with you to give some context. It is, as I say, something that I deliberated over at quite some length as to how I could make the Pacific Island Forum work. This is a unique set of circumstances. I don't anticipate being in this situation again. And I'm happy to take questions on that if anyone has any. But first up today, I want to talk about the living wage and some changes that we have made recently, which is now having positive flow-on effects. And I want to invite to the stage Amanda Sykes and Sammy Tottenham. Would you mind joining me briefly? Two PSA members who work in the public service. Amanda is a library assistant with DIA, and Sammy is a deputy registrar at the Ministry of Justice. This week, Amanda and Sammy and 2,000 other core public servants were given pay rises as a result of our decision to pay everyone in the core public sector at least the 2018 living wage. As of September 1, workers in the core public sector will be paid a minimum of $20.55 an hour. And in our view, they deserve nothing less. This is an issue of basic fairness. The lift to core public service workers' pay is one of a raft of other changes that we've made, and they're all designed to lift the incomes of those on lower and middle incomes who have missed out, in our view, over the past decade. Just some of those changes have been, of course, the 164,000 workers who will benefit from our minimum wage increase, which came in on the 1st of April 2018. That's why, of course, we've said we'll also keep lifting the minimum wage to $20 by 2021. We raised the income of over 380,000 families through Working for Families. We've approved major pay increases for mental health and education support workers in pay equity deals. And we've also, of course, made the decision around our own pay and the pay of public sector CEOs as part of the work we're doing to try and make sure that those on lower and middle incomes are earning more without seeing significant increases at the top end. But I think Amanda and Sammy wanted to say something for themselves, so I'll hand over briefly to them and then I'll open up for questions.
Hi everyone. I just wanted to say that I'm really pleased about the lift to living wage, especially for me with quite a large student loan. It will just help alleviate that a bit more, as well as a contribution to my KiwiSaver and such. So yeah, just living in a place like Wellington, it will just help alleviate some of those stresses that come just with day-to-day living as well. So no, I'm really pleased with what's been done today and future things.
Yeah, I really appreciate the change that has happened. It tells me that I am really valued for the work that I do and as a citizen of Aotearoa. So yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here to say this, but to also know that I have a better chance at securing my future as well.
And they're said that they're open for any questions anyone wants to ask as well about the living wage.
What were you getting before?
Not the living wage? Yeah, closer to minimum.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
You're off the hook.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, the two of you.
Okay, I'm happy then to take any general questions that you might have.
Prime Minister, this decision for you to have a plane fly back and pick you up to take you up to Nauru.
It'll be flying to New Zealand instead of the Marshall Islands. So my understanding is that, of course, because it can't sit on the tarmac, there is literally nowhere for the plane to be. It had to leave anyway. I think the alternative would have been to be in the Marshall Islands. It's instead coming back to New Zealand.
So what is the additional cost?
I do not know the additional cost. No one ever
Marshall
provided
Islands
that.
is about an hour away. New Zealand
Yes.
is 5.5 hours away.
Yes, that is
The
correct.
cost, return cost to fly a 757 fuel alone is $55,000. Do you think that's a good use of taxpayers' money?
As I said, Barry, I asked officials when I was deliberating over this decision around the additional cost, and the response I had at the time, verbally, the response I had was it had to leave Nauru anyway. The point was also has also been made to me that there are a certain number of hours that is budgeted for the 757, that it's either used for official visits like this, or it's used for running up training hours, and that in their view, that this therefore that wasn't a way to balance out or question the cost, that it would be spent anyway, essentially was the message I had back.
If you sought assurances about the cost, why didn't you ask what the additional cost would be?
Well, obviously the answer I had back was that those flying hours are allocated anyway. So I never had anything that suggested to me that it was of such a significant spend that was of concern. But I did weigh the point I'm raising. The reason I'm sharing it is I weighed up all of these issues because this is a unique set of circumstances. There won't be many occasions that have these set of circumstances, and it was something I gave a lot of thought to. But the other option was not attending. And that didn't feel right to me either. There's a considerable number of issues at present that are topical. We place huge importance on our role in the Pacific Islands. I think equally there would have been criticism for my non-attendance, and so I made the call to attend.
Presumably those flying hours would have come at the expense of those flying hours being used on something else.
Well, I cannot answer that. I don't have that information. But certainly the feedback I got was that it would have been spent otherwise. Whether that could have been training, and this of course is a substitute for that, I just don't know. But I was given assurance that the plane simply could not stay in Nauru. It had to leave anyway. So the impression I was left with was that it wouldn't be at a great additional expense to any of the agencies. That was the impression I was left with.
Well, it costs a lot more to fly 1 hour than it does 5.5
Again, you're making, as I say, I haven't broken this down, but the feedback that I got or have been given is that if it's not spent doing this, then in other times on other occasions, it would be spent doing other things, perhaps training or flying hours. I was never left with the impression that I was racking up an additional extra cost as a result of this decision.
So perhaps this is at the expense of further training.
Perhaps. I've never had it broken down for me in writing, but as I say, I did ask the question verbally because I was weighing up all of these issues in making this decision.
When did you make the call?
I've been back and forth on it in some time. I couldn't give you a precise answer on that, to be honest, because we went through the logistics of it over a number of weeks. But this was something I was even deliberating while I was on maternity leave.
Did
So.
you consider taking Neve up there a few days earlier with Winston Peters on that same plane?
She can't. She essentially isn't immunised to travel to Nauru. She's too young. She hasn't had all the immunisations
You're
required.
overseas in a couple of weeks?
Yes, they're not places where she's exposed to the same issues.
Is New Zealand still committed to
And actually, when she's had, I believe, another set of shots then, without wanting to get into all personal medical records and the like.
is the government still committed to doubling the refugee quota?
Yes, we are.
So would you be surprised then that Winston Peters today from Nauru has said that the government has made no such commitment?
We haven't finalised all the details of that commitment, but that remains part of our policy.
He said the government has never made that commitment.
It hasn't come through cabinet. That's an accurate representation, but that is still a commitment that we have.
So he's saying that you'd go as far as 1,000, but not to 1,500.
That is a commitment that we've made. It hasn't come through cabinet yet. What we have had to make sure that we can do is ensure that all of those refugees at this point can be resettled appropriately, and that we have the facilities to do that. That's something we've had to invest in order to build up that capacity to make sure that we do the resettlement process appropriately and properly.
Given what he's saying, there is a chance now that you won't double the quota to 1,500.
Again, I would want to check the context of all of those questions, but as I've said, that commitment still
He
remains.
said it's a Labor promise, not a government promise, but subsequently the immigration minister said 1,500, but Winston Peters says no.
Again, it hasn't come through cabinet yet. That's a fair reflection that final paper has not come before us
So
yet.
it could be kiboshed at cabinet.
No, I'm not preempting that. But what I am being clear on is, process-wise, it hasn't come to cabinet yet.
But is he sorting out something for you to do up there when you're in Nauru in terms of meeting asylum seekers? And will you be consulting with the Nauru government? Will you require their consent before you meet any asylum seekers?
No, not necessarily. But my understanding is there's still some logistics around the program that I understand, whilst Minister Peters is on the ground, is being worked through. Yeah.
Just on Meka Whaitiri, are you aware of any personal grievances that were made against her during her time as
I'm not making any comments on any other issues relevant to employment matters until this process has been gone through. This is something that natural justice needs to apply to. Ministerial services are undertaking this work now, and I do want to let that process run its course. It's only fair to both parties.
Did you ask Meka Whaitiri to stay in her electorate? Did you ask Meka Whaitiri to stay in her electorate this week? Or
No.
did you do it of her own volition?
No. For me, this is it was an open option. I support the minister's decision either way. She has a significant electorate. There's always plenty to be done, whether it's here or in her area.
Is she still drawing a ministerial
Oh,
salary?
oh, oh.
Is she still drawing a ministerial salary even though she's stepped aside as a minister?
Yeah, look, it's only fair that whilst we're undertaking investigation into a set of allegations, that she, as in would be a case in other situations, she has stepped aside but still remains on pay while this investigation's ongoing. That's only fair. That's general employment practice.
So given the discretion that you have as Prime Minister who's in your cabinet, is it safe to assume that she still has your confidence?
Yeah, I'm not going to preempt any investigation that's currently underway. It would be unfair to do so. Natural justice needs to apply here, and it's only fair to all parties that I allow something that is contested to be looked in fully.
How long will the investigation take?
I understand it could take up to a couple of weeks. I've certainly conveyed via my office to Ministerial Services, whilst I understand the process needs to be undertaken properly, that I would hope that it would be done in a speedy and efficient manner.
Do you expect her to be back in Parliament next week?
I haven't quite established that with the minister yet, but that could well be the case. But that's not something that I've discussed with her directly yet.
Issues or complaints were raised about her either during her time in opposition or as a minister to Ministerial Services or Parliamentary Services. Would you expect to be alerted about those complaints or issues raised?
I'm not going to get into any other matters relating to employment issues, particularly while this piece of work is underway.
It does speak to what you knew, though, as either party leader or Prime Minister.
Keeping in mind I was party leader for 7 weeks before the election, but again, I'm not going to get into any situation around employment matters whilst this investigation is underway.
Prime Minister, was the provision of 3 all-weather racetracks something that was agreed between Labour and New Zealand First Minister and Coalition for?
This will be a reference to, no doubt, the piece of work that was released on Thursday, which was commissioned by the Minister for Racing. But that right now is up for discussion and debate and isn't government policy. But it is a piece of work that we hope will encourage the racing industry to engage in a bit of conversation about how to make sure we see the full benefits of that industry to New Zealand.
It did come up prior to that. The media reported it before that report was released last week.
You said 3 though, didn't you?
Yeah.
Did you say 3? No.
And the provision of Shane Jones said that the provision of all-weather tracks was a legacy from the coalition discussion.
You already know what's in the coalition agreement. It's in the public domain.
No, but that's not. That wasn't.
What we've agreed to is in the public domain.
But he said it was agreed to during the coalition. So
What we have agreed to is in the public domain. Everything else goes through Cabinet and goes through a
There is
process.
that document that none of us have seen.
And as I've always said, the things that we've agreed to are in the coalition agreement and the confidence and supply agreement.
How are you going to reconcile the closure of...
That really cuts right through that voice. But I saw, oh, there you are.
How are you going to reconcile the closure of over 20 racetracks with your $1 billion being spent on provincial...
Well, of course, you're preempting the decision making around what's been in the discussion document, and no decisions on that have been made.
Prime Minister, on synthetic...
Don't worry, Tova, I know exactly where you are every time.
In July, the acting Prime Minister said that the government would be taking urgent
Yes.
action on synthetics. What's the government done since then? What's the plan?
Yes, and since that time I understand that the Minister of Health and the Minister of Police have been looking in their respective areas. I'll be asking them to give me a report back. But one of the things that I've looked at since then, the number of hospital admissions that we have, for instance, across substances beyond psychoactive substances is alarming in every single category. Alcohol far outstrips anything in terms of psychoactive substances. Methamphetamine's high as well, even cannabis. I think that that's not to lessen what we're seeing from synthetics. It's to say we have a problem across the board. So if we are looking at that area, we need to be really looking at addiction and treatment services generally.
Except the Drug Foundation is saying that this is unprecedented, that this is a public health crisis, and what you're saying doesn't sound particularly urgent.
No, what I'm saying is there's urgency around all of it. We have seen, according to the coroner's report, certainly, based on what they're reporting, the level of the death rate is certainly high. And that, of course, should be causing us alarm. But as I've said before, the biggest tool that we have is saying that these items, these products, are illegal. We've already pulled out that tool and it still hasn't worked. And that's why we need to keep looking for answers. Some have said to me that access to addiction services is one of the keys, but I've even seen reports from those services that in key areas that have said we're available, we've still got a problem. So this is an issue that is not easy. If it was, I would have come out yesterday with a solution.
How quickly can those communities that are affected, how quickly can they, will they see resources to try and curb?
I guess that's the issue. In some of those communities, they're saying they already have them, and unfortunately, they're still seeing high use and harm. And this, I guess, is me reaching out and saying, those who have experience, what worked for you? We've got to try and find a way to stop losing lives, seeing harm, and yet, when it comes to government and the law, we've used that tool. What else is there? And so we're still looking.
Are you
Labour
still
still
Labour still hasn't committed to putting forward a person to sit on the cross-parliamentary group on mental health that's been proposed by National, will you?
Sorry, we haven't put forward a person.
Labour hasn't confirmed that they'll take part in the cross-parliamentary.
Oh, look, I wasn't aware of that, and I'm happy to look into it. I wasn't aware.
Are you frustrated that the ministerial expenses are now 3 weeks later?
Yes.
Do you know why?
Yes, as the Minister for Ministerial Services has already set out, there was a book of information that apparently wasn't included, that Ministerial Services discovered before they went to do the release. And so they've had to go back and do another check on their data set before release. But yes, I am frustrated by that. It's, everyone's obviously waiting, and it was incomplete information.
Last night, Grant Robertson said the government would still have done very well if it achieved a debt target of 20.6% debt to GDP in 2022. Does that mean the government is not as committed to its budget responsibilities
No.
as it used to be?
No.
So, are you aiming for still 20, but will be quite happy to come over, or will we definitely hit 20?
Our budget responsibility rules remain unchanged, and that is the target in them.
So what did he mean when he said that last night?
Yeah, well, obviously being able to achieve that relative to other OECD nations, is still a good outcome, but we remain committed to the budget responsibility rules. Judge us once we get there, not on what the anticipated result is.
I must have a couple of questions on Abby Hartley in Bali, Simon Bridges,
Yes.
who arranged a medevac for her, which has been funded by private donors who contacted him. Is that cynical politicking?
Look, I think all of us were moved by the story because all of us have travelled. Well, many of us have travelled, and of course no one wants to be in that situation. And we deal with, unfortunately, a huge number of these cases. And my hope always is that we have people who are well cared for when the incident happens, and that insurance is able to support them if they are in a situation like the one we've seen. So if we're able to see that family supported and well, that's a good outcome. And actually, it doesn't, if Simon's stepping in to provide some personal support, I'm not going to criticise that. But from a government perspective, we have to make sure we do what we can, acknowledging that there are tens of thousands of New Zealanders who travel and many who we do end up supporting who have medical issues while they're away.
So why not in this case didn't the government do that?
When I say support, I mean on-the-ground support. Unfortunately, there just isn't the ability to help every single New Zealander who becomes unwell aboard. Our advice always is, please make sure you're insured. And I have to say, for an insurer to call this a pre-existing condition just does not feel right to me.
Just finally back on the refugee quota, can you give a categorical assurance that the government will lift the refugee quota to 1,500?
Again, as I say, I've always been very cautious about this. This is something that we remain committed to, but it has not been to Cabinet, and I've pointed that out a few times before. We've had other pieces of work that's needed to come through first, including making sure we have the budget available to get the resources up to make sure we can accommodate 1,500. And so we've already done that, so that should be a very good indication about our direction of travel.
Do you expect this to happen in the first term?
Yes.
You expect it, but it's no longer a government promise, is it?
Well, as I'm saying, everything has to go through Cabinet. We've remained committed to it. We've put the resource in to make it happen. But we, of course, always go through a process. But yes, we campaigned on 1,500. We remain committed to 1,500 and we're resourcing for 1,500. But it does still need to go through Cabinet.
Prime Minister, is it a good look for our Minister of Health to appoint a chairman of Farmac, who's a former Labour minister, without interviewing anyone else and against Treasury advice?
The advice was about a reappointment as opposed to opposition to another alternate appointment. But if the person you're pointing out has also been the Vice-Chancellor of a university that has 3,000 staff and oversees a budget of millions of dollars, then I think that person was eminently qualified, regardless of whether they had a political career or not.
Do board appointments go through wider cabinet scrutiny?
Yes. Yes.
So the whole cabinet had seen the proposal?
Yes. So it goes through the Appointments and Honours Cabinet Committee. Yes.
Were there any other alternatives offered?
That's a level of detail that I don't tend to get into around appointments, but I am happy to say that it did go through APH, as do all appointments at that level.
Prime Minister, a Myanmar court just sentenced 2 Reuters journalists to 7 years in prison after they reported on a massacre of Rohingya men. This is seen by a lot of human rights groups as a violation of free speech. Does the New Zealand government condemn this?
I haven't looked into the detail of that report. We have certainly expressed our concerns around what has happened in Rohingya, both within Forum, where Myanmar has been represented, in the likes of ASEAN and so on, and will continue to do so. So regardless of whether or not there are issues with the reporting or actually the issue itself, we have certainly raised those concerns in the past.
Just back to the board appointments, isn't it good practice for a government to interview a wide range of candidates for an appointment, even if Mr Mahari was well qualified for the position?
Again, Mr Mahari is well qualified for the position. I can't speak to the individual process that the Minister of Health has gone through for every individual appointment, but there was no question raised over his qualification to do the role. What I will also say is that the official's initial advice was simply around a reappointment. that the current chair of Pharmac had already completed 3 terms as chair since 2009, so it's not unusual to refresh a chair after that amount of time has been served. All right, any other questions? Okay, thanks, Dean.
I was just going to say, appointments. I'm trying to take your advice on board. The appointment of Christopher Luxon, the amount of criticism that you've had over that, including from Shane Jones, do you think it was a wise appointment?
Yes, sir. Look, I'll take just for that last one. All right, I am going to answer that one. So the question was relating to the Business Advisory Council. Look, I think the criticism is premature. I would say unfair as well. We haven't completed the appointments for the Business Advisory Council. We already have a representative body around small business, but I intend to also appoint individuals who will be able to bring a small business voice to the table through my advisory council as well. So I do call that criticism premature. Right?
Have you told Shane Jones that?
Yes.